Life is hectic, demanding, and doesn't stop. When honest with ourselves, we must confess we often don't know what the hell we're doing. The Larkcast is an ongoing conversation about the inclusive and mischievous nature of God's presence through the lens of all the things that make up this phenomenon we refer to as life. Astonishing grace and refreshing honesty collide right here for your weekly encouragement.
Here we go. 3, 2, and 1. Welcome back to the Larkcast. Coming off of a long July 4th weekend. My body, Russ, is not happy with me.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up so that I didn't have to.
My body is not happy with me.
Like you're moving slow.
We got invited to a lot of parties over the last 4 days. I accepted those invitations and went to those parties. And
It's pretty out of character for you, though.
Yeah. Man, I didn't do anything yesterday. I drove out to Southwest Michigan, went to Haymarket, got some pizzas with my two daughters and their friend. And I didn't drink anything but water. And I am moving slow today.
Still moving slow.
Yep.
See, I thought you were moving slow because, you were dodging fireworks. You got a little unexpected workout, but I'm guessing you were just larking around all weekend.
It's been a long time since my buddies were shooting Roman candles at me, so I wasn't dodging any fireworks. But yeah, it was a fun-filled weekend where I live, parades and food and drinks and hangs. I got to bring this
That's
up because
awesome.
the last party I went to was at Johnny's house. Johnny's a friend of ours, as they say in the mafia. But the ours is Lark instead of,
The mafia.
the Italian syndicate.
Right.
Well, anyways, his next door neighbors are Bulgarian. So they threw a joint party.
Mm.
Oh my gosh, man. It was just like this weird, like Eastern European, like techno dance music going on. Two in-ground swimming pools, tons of good food, mixed drinks, a lot of people. It was great. It was great.
Getting a little nervous at times, looking around, seeing if Denzel Washington as the equalizer is creeping in. Like, kind of having fun and watching over your shoulder at the same time.
Yeah, it was good times. And I
Nah,
think for
man.
us,
Cheers to
like
that.
you have a lot of house projects going on. You got a lot going on. And then we had Cam's our oldest grad party. So we had a bunch of, stuff we were doing, getting ready for that. And you guys know how it is. Like when you're in the middle of house projects, you're just
Yeah.
deadbeat tired and you can't wait for it to be over. It's so good that it's getting done, but it's just like a lot of work. And so for us, like just getting past 4th of July weekend, because we had our normal party that we host. It wasn't as big this year, but Cam's grad party was just 6 days earlier. So now we're like, okay, cool. Like we can finally enjoy summer. Like we're past it.
And then you're like, oh wait, there's this next party that's coming up.
Well,
No,
I was
man,
I
I
was just
get it.
attending those.
Yeah, cheers to 4th of July. Cheers to um all that we celebrate in it and time with people, man. And I mean, I think this story to me is, everything that you're bringing up is pretty relevant to even like the topic that we're going to discuss today because I can remember being in the church world, leading out in that for year, after year after year. And 4th of July, a lot like Christmas and Thanksgiving or St. Patrick's Day even, um, you've kind of found yourself like on the outs, like within the church world, there was a lot of time spent and a lot of energy spent on celebration of certain things, but it was always like in the safety of the tribe of, you know what I mean, your local church community, and you're sort of over here. And meanwhile, there's this whole bigger, broader world of people that are having fun in the celebration of this over here. And I just remember always like living in that tension, man. Like I'm doing this thing and we're hosting this thing, over here because this is what we're supposed to do. But meanwhile, my heart really wants to be over there.
Hmm.
And all of the neighbors that I've been connecting with, or people at the gym, or the local pub that you go to, they're all involved in having fun over here.
Yeah.
And I'm stuck over there. And it was just such a disconnect, man. And I kind of found myself this 4th of July just relaxing in that, like just having fun, connecting with some people in and around me, shooting off stuff in the front yard. Now, wearing my Daisy Duke shorts, man, and my rubber boots.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it was like, the church is a community. It's a group of people.
yeah.
Um, people who have said yes to Jesus, or who are trying to say yes, to him, or people who are
Hmm.
thinking of saying yes to him for the first time or considering it, or, whatever. And you always felt like you just had to, um, the insular kind of version of that is the church has to have its own t-ball league, and it has to have its own softball league, and it has to have its own,
Yep.
parties, and it has to have, it kind of just exists for itself, and it's just insular from, you know, the world around you.
Hmm.
And my story was, just having a heart for my neighbors, but I thought that this church service thing was going to be the thing that I just needed to stay faithful at and invite them to, you know, and we would eventually get around to having the conversation of Jesus, or you sitting through a 45-minute sermon of me having a one-way conversation about this thing. And then maybe awkwardly later on, we could talk about it.
So, what did you think about my talk?
Yeah. Um, and for me, my journey kind of away from um, you know, the Western, version, or like being a pastor, doing ministry in like a full-time vocational sense, was like I was on this block um for like 8 years, I think. I think I moved in 2012 on my street. I met you in 2014, and I didn't leave that till 2016. So you had like 4 years on my block. I didn't know any of my neighbors.
Yeah.
And what's funny is 2 doors down, this guy moved in, and he's a worship pastor at a local church that know, if I said the name.
Mm.
And he's same as me. It's almost like looking back on myself, back in 2012. I don't know any of the neighbors. They're all hanging out.
Mm.
I'd see him. I just drive right past them, do a wave. Everyone kind of like knows my name, but no one knows me. And I'm just on my way to doing church stuff and people stuff outside of the people that I live around. And my story, like that started to really eat at me. And I was like, man, like, dude, my whole world is just a big, massive bubble. And so it was a
Mm.
really cool story came out of this weekend because we hosted Cam's grad party. We had about 200 out. It was a really cool thing. Um, and we were just smoked. And normally we throw a 4th of July party for the block. We've been doing it for the last 4 years. And so we were sitting just in the driveway with some neighbors, and we're like, yeah, like everyone's just kind of sharing, and we're like, yeah, we're just kind of tired, man. Like we're thinking about like not throwing this party or whatever. And my neighbor Terry looks at me. He goes, like pulls a cigar out of his mouth, just like you have in yours right now. He goes, I'm doing an egg toss in your backyard on 4th of July. Like that's
Mm.
happening because we do an egg toss every year. I did that on my dad's side, growing up South Chicago. Him, not me.
That's really
Around
cool.
all these like, drywallers and firefighters and, all his cousins that were, still living out there. We did an egg toss every year. And so they're like, no, like we're doing it. And it was just a really cool moment that I had just for myself. I was like, dude, back in 2016, I literally left because I knew none of my neighbors. and I wanted to just have real relationships with people in my community who were never coming to hear me preach. I left that so I could form these friendships in the hopes that God Himself, would begin to work and that I would just be there, for when the time came when they wanted to have the conversation. And that would be a person that they would just trust and
Mm.
and want to chat with. To like 8 years later, after knowing none of my neighbors are like, oh no, like you're having this party. Like
Right.
we're not. You're like, it's not an option. Like you're doing this. And it was like one of those things you just kind of look back and you're like, dang, man, like that's really freaking cool, man. And that's never going to get celebrated on a stage. I'm not going
Right.
to get an award for that. I'm not going to get even patted on the back, for that. But I just had a really cool, like worshipful, thankful moment with the Lord, like on that one.
Dude, that's really encouraging. Really encouraging. And just like you said, like it was so different. Like you went from not knowing them to when you needed to take a break from doing something at your house with a fourth, you've got neighbors going, "Oh no, no, we'll help. We're doing this." And then just,
Well, I
I
don't know how
know
much they helped, but they were in my backyard.
they promised. So, you know, but then I know like in talking with you, outside of, this setting, like, other events that went on for the fourth in your community, right? Where you've got business owners, right? People that you would never have rubbed shoulders with in the
Mm-hmm.
previous church world that you've now been invited into and bringing your family into and friendships and conversations, which lead to more conversations and sharing and the passing on of good news. And like, man, there's just such beauty and simplicity. And I think you put it best when you said worshipful, just a worshipful experience found in just being a friend and
Mm-hmm.
allowing our friendship to be that unnamed expression of the church wherever we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's something to be enjoyed for us, and there's something to be enjoyed among the people that were in and around. But one thing I have found recently is there are people on the front end of this.
Yeah.
They can't look back. Like I can look back 10 years from stepping away from the machine into what I'm now enjoying in the name of following Jesus. You're
Mm-hmm.
looking back right after 8 years now running in this and being able to go, man, amen. But I keep finding, man, as we're passing on good news, right, in the conversation of Lark, keep finding more and more people they're on the front end. They're people who either, they were, senior pastors like we were, or some form of like, pastoral staff, or maybe they were, you know, I hate this word because it's it's not reflective of the scriptures, but it's helpful for people from the church world, right? They were bivocational, or they were just, laity in the sense of an elder or a deacon or a ministry director or
Yeah.
a small group leader. They're not getting paid for any form of ministry that they're doing. But the point is, they're people who have been in leadership
Mm-hmm.
in some form of like um, Western expression of the church.
Yep.
And they've been grabbing on the good news, grabbing onto the freedom found in just trusting Jesus instead of toiling for Jesus, right? They found freedom to go be present in and among neighbors, to be transparent about their lives because they don't have
Yeah.
anything to hide anymore.
Right.
And, but in doing so, I get this sense for a lot of them in my conversations that they feel like the glory days have passed them by.
Yeah. Yep.
Because what you had mentioned earlier, there is no fame or fortune in this.
Nope.
And I think we see that in Jesus, so we shouldn't be shocked by it. But but if you've grown up in that other system, man, there's sort of this expectation of glory to be found, right? In doing this work versus no, man, a lot of what we do in the name of following him is it's gonna go unnoticed.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes it won't be celebrated till later.
Yeah.
And
No, for sure. And I think, especially
it's hard on them.
yeah, especially for me, I thought like when I was a passer, I was like pretty mindful of the whole like celebrity thing and people who wanted to just be friends with you or patting you on the back or saying awesome sermon just because like that's what you're supposed to do. I kind of was like a dick about it towards the end. Like, oh man, like great sermon. I was like, which part? Oh,
Yeah.
and you're like, yeah, dude, this is just
I'll show
flattery.
them.
This is just flattery, and you started to see just how hollow it all was. But for someone in a position of power, like, dude, it's real easy for your ego to like grab onto that. And I didn't know how much I was grabbing onto it in my heart until I actually left. And, you'd see October roll around, Pastor Appreciation Month, and normally there'd be like, some cards, some gift cards, and those few cool people in the congregation would leave a bottle of bourbon or,
Yep.
something. And there wasn't any of it. And I remember like really struggling with it,
Yeah.
and but I knew it was good, obviously, and because that whole like cult of celebrity and all that stuff, it was just a fake and vain sort of flattery. But yeah, it's a real thing, man. And you know, losing respectability in the
Yeah.
church world, for what we're doing because you could probably pitch it and even argue from the scriptures with somebody like from that world and they will like, man, that's really cool. And they'll say like, that's awesome. But really what starts to happen is, you know, there starts to be like some separation in that they don't understand it. They feel like you're crossing the line. Um,
Mm.
they kind of start to see you as a little bit of like someone who's just not trusted because you're not going to church anywhere. Um, and so, that separation like really, really grows. So the surrounding church community sort of starts to, fade away. And you're left to, form, friendships on the margins. Um,
Yeah.
with and just everyday people. And even if you're open about you identifying with Jesus, like there's a little bit of, there's that too. So you almost like don't have a home, so to speak. You're not like fully and wholly embraced because they know like, hey man, like this dude, like he's, watch out with Sorcy or Johnson, like he'll start talking to
Yeah.
you about Jesus. So there's a little bit of that hesitation with this, like, your neighbors and your community, and then the church world too is a little suspicious of you. And so you really don't have a home. But what's crazy about that is like you're not alone in that because
Yeah.
Jesus said the same thing. Foxes have holes, birds have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Um, he was not respected, by the religious establishment. And that's just putting it lightly because they ended up pushing politically to murder him at the end of his life. And he
Yeah.
was left alone, at the end of his days. He argued, mostly, with them. And he was considered like not a legit rabbi. Or his, he was saying like he's a blasphemer and has a demon because he's eating meals,
Hmm.
um with prostitutes, with sinners, with tax collectors, and he's challenging their foundational theology. So he was called a heretic. He was called a blasphemer. He wasn't respected at all. And so I find comfort in that. Um, I wish I had more of an impact in my head and heart at times.
Yeah.
um, but yeah,
Yeah. I think you're right in that. And what you have found and what I've found, and I know others have found, is as you go about this, like Jesus, that community starts to form where you're at.
yeah,
Friendships start to form, right? Good news starts to be shared, and you'll even see people come alive in him.
hmm,
But but the beauty in the community is still there,
yeah,
despite what anyone else, right, believes or doesn't believe yet.
hmm,
And I think that's been such an encouragement and a joy in my life, and I know in your life, and I think that's kind of what we have to look at. That's what we have to start to see and to value because like it or not, what we typically value as people is what we measure. And I found that so much of what we valued and therefore measured within the Western normative church um, actually led you in the opposition, led you in a way that was contrary to the way of Jesus,
Hmm.
right? Not in unity with it. But I think if you can start to see friendship, um, this life of faith that you've stepped into, right, as the value point, then it starts to become what you celebrate. It starts to become what you, right, what you enter into, and it seems to get you through the good times and the low times. Because you're right, like when you've lost, when you're not revered the way you once were, you know, I mean, it can be challenging, and that's where that phrase that I'd used earlier came to me, like this, like my glory days have passed me by.
Hmm.
That's kind of what I seem to be hearing from people who have reached out.
Damn, bro, drink some water. I'm not editing this out, by the way. Yeah, drink that coffee. Shout out Stan's Donuts. Nice mug.
Well, that was
That was something.
that was something.
I
um
wish I could pass you a glass of water through this Zoom call.
yeah, all this sanding of various materials in the, in this endless project of fixing a home that's been in ruin for a little while. It's definitely gotten to me. But back to what I was saying, it's those glory days passing you by. And while I was listening to this, I was kind of reminded of it, man, in a movie that I've seen recently. And it's a movie that I love, a movie that I've always loved. I haven't seen it in a while, but I sat down and watched it with my youngest son Eli here recently, and it's Secondhand Lions. Um,
I don't know if I've
and
ever seen
it's,
that one.
dude, you gotta check it out. Everybody listening right now, if you haven't seen Secondhand Lions, seriously, take 2 hours, kick your feet up. It's a it's a good, wholesome, heartwarming story, man.
Nice.
And I don't want to give it all away, but the bottom line is, the first few times I watched the movie, I thought the movie was about the character of the boy. He's got the father's not in the picture. Mom, is just a hardcore narcissist that's not really all that interested in him. It just keeps passing him on, and off to, various things. And so she's got this idea of, you know what, I'm going to get away for a little while and maybe find a way to, score some money from my rich uncles. They don't look like they're rich. They live like they're not rich, but there's this story of like their wild past, and they're sitting on a pile of gold somewhere. And it's Michael Caine and Robert Duvall. They're two brothers, and
Hmm.
they're old men that live out in the middle of nowhere in this rundown house in Texas. And so she drops off her son to stay with him while she's going to go to, some school training, which she doesn't. But and and so you think the movie again, it's about this, the development, right, of this boy. And it took me a few times of watching it with my kids over the years because I watched it with all of them until it finally hit me that this isn't a movie about the boy. It's a movie that's about these two old men who have this crazy, wild past of adventure. Okay. And especially the one brother, Robert Duvall, thinks that his glory days, his whole purpose and premise of life has passed him by.
Hmm.
And all that's really left in front of him is just to wait around to die. And there's this really beautiful scene where the boy's like, been staying with him, he's gotten comfortable with him, and he's like just begging him to wake up. I need you to be around. I need you to teach me how to be a man. I need you to be there for me. And it's kind of like you'll see Robert Duvall's character, but he just kind of like, all right, all right, all right, all right, all right. So I'll stick around and be your damn uncle. It's one of my favorite lines in the movie. And but that's it, man. Like there's this purpose that's in front of him. There's something beautiful and joyful in front of him, but he's just missing it
Hmm.
because it's not tied to all that he thinks is life. All the fame and the fortune that he's known before is not going to be found in this. And so therefore he thinks there's no life in it. And what he doesn't realize is that there's a richness in what lies in front of him that
Mm.
far exceeds the riches that he found in the past.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah, it's
like,
great,
I'm
man.
watching this and I'm like, dude, that's so many of the people that I've met from the church world who know this system doesn't work and they never found freedom in it. They never found time in it. They never found the adventure of faith that you see in Jesus in this. And so they long for something more, but there's that tension, man, right? Of, well, I can't bring any of this with me and all that I've become so accustomed to, almost like a high, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be gone.
Yeah.
But man, please hear me when I say, but what lies in front of you? That unnamed, unhurried, right? Unambitious way of faith known as friendship is a pot of gold, man. Not just for you, but it's a pot of gold for everybody that you get to love on with no strings attached.
Yeah. And I think part of the reason why it messes with you is because, Sunday after Sunday would give you this illusion, all these people gathered in this room, these worship sets, it's clapping, it's, people patting you on the back on messages. And you had your impact on people and stuff like that. Like,
Hmm.
there's some real genuine stories, from, my days there, and people who go to churches are people too, and they need to be cared
Yeah,
for and good news needs to be passed on to them. Um, and I don't think we're over here, saying like screw church people, or whatever. I think we're just like, dude,
no,
there's like 80% of society is just outside, not interested in church, and they're not coming. And our heart was for them, which was like a driver and an impetus, for us in the beginning.
for
But
sure.
we've been mostly have gotten known for just like, just pounding the drum of grace and freedom, because it's without that, you're not gonna have the tools. If you even want to say it that way, I would say just have a good understanding of the person of Jesus for this journey. Because, and I was just telling somebody at one of the parties this past week, because his dad just passed away, and there's been all these like really, really cool conversations he's been having with business associates of him, because he stepped into his dad's role in his company, and he's had a really
Mm,
neat opportunity to share Jesus in some neat ways, like real organic ways, nothing forced, which is kind of like what he comes from, like this real force sort of. And I think
mm,
he's reaping the benefit of a dad who just like had a company and lived that First Thessalonians quiet life, you know?
yeah,
And all the I think the fruit of him just being like a good dude and a good business owner and a good partner. He died at 60 and isn't even like reaping, quote unquote, the fruit of having these conversations like his son is. And I told him about one of my neighbors who I met, and I think Tim even listens to this podcast, sometimes. I met Tim like right when he lives right next door to me. I met him like right when I was like transitioning, away from that world, and, you know, probably at times like saw him as a project, and, a lot of that was just me undoing a lot of my thinking, and how those old paradigms of mission like made people turn people into projects, and you thought you're like
yeah,
you have to like work this thing, do A and B, and then C is gonna happen, instead of just like being a friend, like seeing yourself as like you're also just a human, like everybody else, you're not special. But knowing something really freaking good and waiting for,
nice.
the opportunity when they might be interested in that. But my whole thing with Tim was like a 7-year relationship, to where we even got to talking about, or he trusted me enough, to start these conversations. And our friendship's been, just awesome. He had something pretty tragic happen in his life, and he knew that he could talk to me about that. And he's just in my driveway. And now we're having
Mm,
these conversations about life and God and faith and good news, and, even some nitty gritty kind of like, Bible questions and hangups that he had and stuff like that. And it's so funny, man. Like, I was so like that relationship in particular, along with a tattoo artist friend of mine named Mike, were the ones that kind of mess with me the most, because you leave the church with this big vision. Oh man, like I'm gonna step outside these walls and I'm gonna go. And then there's just like for a really long time, there's nothing.
Hmm.
It's just conversations about tattoos and meals and hanging out. And there's nothing. And you're just wrestling with God, like, what the heck? Like, raise the dead, like let's go. Um,
He's like, I have.
yeah. And it's I told this Josh guy, I was like, dude, no one ever prepared me for the 7 year friendship. No one even painted it
Mm,
in those terms. It was just like, yeah, dude, like get to know him a little bit, then like here's some cool ways where you can like share Jesus or whatever.
yeah,
Um, and you especially start to think your glory days are behind you because of the like it lacks the shine of a lot of what like the Western normative thing gives you. I
yeah,
was used to like every Sunday, big service, like you counting the numbers and counting the money. Like every week you had your something to hang your hat on and be like, yeah, I'm making a difference. Then you'd have like big baptism services, which was mostly just like people coming from Dutch churches and they had to get baptized, become members because we had Baptist bylaws, or it was people who had like, rededicated their life to Jesus again
yeah.
and they've been baptized for the fifth time or whatever. But you're like, dude, we're counting it.
It's like some
Um,
dude in a room somewhere a long time ago was like, I know how we can increase our baptism numbers.
well, you can't be a member unless you're baptized. It's like so
Oh
silly.
man.
But yeah, it doesn't have that pop. It doesn't have that shine. It's just a lot
Mm-mm.
of mundane, just like genuinely just being a friend and being a
Yeah,
neighbor with no illusion that this might go somewhere or whatever. And you're not there because of that. You literally just grow to love these people for just who they are.
yeah,
And you're nobody special anymore. And like Tim might listen to this podcast, and if he does, I've talked to him about this. If it sounds weird, you probably would think it would sound weird to them, but like, dude, that's the journey there because there's something about like that the church world that it frames you as something more than just an everyday person, just a guest at the table. You think you're more special than that. You
yeah,
think you're the host, you think you're the cook, you think you're the owner of the restaurant. And it goes back to that first time I met you in Chicago in 2014, back when it was Table Network, you were just getting started. And the banner you had behind the your booth, which by the way, you had a booth at a church conference. So that's another
yeah,
conversation. It
yeah.
says, slow down. We're all guests at the table Jesus prepared, not hosts. And I'm like, what, dude? Like, I'm just a guest. I'm just an object of God's mercy. Man, I thought I was out here like running this thing, like just this illusion of who
Do you
you
know who
are
I am?
and your importance. Yeah, dude,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. Yeah, there was a wealthy businessman in Cleveland that somebody introduced me to when I was first started Table Network. And I was sharing, he asked me to give him a little quick breakdown, and I was sharing some of that. And he looks at me and he goes, "That's your disruptive technology." And I was like, "What?" I didn't understand what he was saying. And he goes, anyways, he goes into this story about like Bill
And
Gates
you're over
when
here, you
everybody,
can't even figure out how to log into your Facebook account. And you're like, what? Like
right?
disruptive technology. I'm glad that got
Yeah.
brought up on the last podcast, by the way.
Yeah, it is funny. People are like, "Russ, so how's Bitcoin going?" I'm like, "I don't even know my Facebook password, and you're asking me if
Crypto.
I'm an expert in crypto." Like, no, I got hacked. But anyways, he tells me about Gates with like they wanted the computer. Gates was like, "Okay, cool. You guys can have the rights to the computer. I just want the
I want
software."
the
They
software. Yeah.
laughed at him. And he goes, "That sounds like you." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "You're trying to help people find the freedom to go slow down, be friends, and let good news be good news. And Jesus takes care of all the rest. He takes care of that too, but it's just like that's so contra count it's so counter to all that we think and know and do." But I remember him saying to me this 10 years ago. He goes, "Don't you think people though will eventually just move on from that? Because it's not gonna have any of the hype that they're accustomed to." And I
Yeah,
just
get
remember
it.
thinking to myself, like, well, that's going to draw into question what it is that we actually believe. It won't be that we're wrong in this or that we need to change the approach. It will come down to what is it that we actually believe.
Yeah, even in the early days of like raising funds to jump in with like table net and lark, you always felt this pressure like you had to have a story, like there was some sort of fruit.
Yeah.
You had to come in your hands with like something, be like, see, look, like I'm worthy. This work is worthy of your dollars. And
Yeah.
you felt the pressure, of that. And a lot of times you're like, hyping things up to make them, feel like they're more than what they are. It's not that you're lying or fabricating, hyperbole, if you will. And it's just the fear and the it's just the fear, that
Yeah.
you have, and you want to keep that hype up and stuff like that, which is so gross. Like hearing me say that, I'm just like, I want to just like throw up right now. But like imagine
But we
Jesus.
were, go ahead.
Well, imagine Jesus, right? He's maybe he's like raising some he's raising funds, and he's writing back to everybody like after his 3 years. So he raises, and Acts says that he sticks around like 40 more days, and he's talking about the kingdom. And right before he ascends, um they're like they still have this like geopolitical understanding of the kingdom, and they're like completely misunderstanding everything. And he
Hmm.
writes back in this newsletter, and he's like, yeah, like those like 12 dudes that I've been telling you guys about for like 3 years. Well, one of them betrayed me and killed himself. And the other 11, we just got done with a 40-day retreat where I was like summarizing everything I've been talking about for 3 years, and they still don't understand what I'm talking about. It's like we are removing our support immediately.
Yeah. Yeah. So just so you guys know, I bolted on them.
Yeah, and
Said I'm out.
I'm out. I'm
I'm
gone.
out. Oh man, it's so true. It's so true. And like in our case, I've been pushed for years. I'm like, dude, you got to every month, man, you got to be telling these stories because we do have stories.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, but on one hand, you're right. A lot of stories are slow, but then on the other hand, so you want me to go and pimp out these people that I love that have become friends that I'm
Yes.
teaching to follow Jesus?
Hmm.
What happens if they see it?
Yeah, it just
Are they not going to
reinforces the
feel like a
whole.
project?
Yep, exactly. Yep. And
And
that's where, like, for me, I was just like, dude, I hate all these strings attached to this because I literally just want to be a dude in my community. And yeah, I'm not gonna hide the fact that, like, dude, I I know Jesus. Even if you think he's not real, like I do. And I'm gonna like low key be praying for you that he'll reveal himself to you. And when he does, like, man, it'd be really, really cool if I was the kind of person in your life that you were like, hey, dude, let's grab coffee and chat about it. That's all I want.
yeah, that's it, man. I think that's literally it. It's it's that good and it's that simple.
Hmm.
So for all of you out there who have come to us from some form of church world, especially those among the leadership tribe, and if you've ever felt like, the glory days are behind me, I can promise you there are people in and around you, even people that you haven't met yet, that like that little boy in the movie is just begging you to stick around and be their damn uncle. Please.
Mm-hmm.
They could probably use friendship, and I know they could use good news of a God who set them free, the God who ended religion, not the God who's handing them religion,
Yeah.
the God who loves who they really are. That's the journey, is to help people see him through the simplicity of unnamed friendships. And yeah, there might not be hype, but I can promise you there's life.
Mm.
There's life in it.
Yeah, buddy.
With that, be encouraged, friends. And if there's anything we can do to help you in that journey, don't hesitate to reach out, larkside.com. Join us.